And in this video, we're going to take a look at adding a background image. So here in my folder with all of my other files, I have this image that I'm going to use for a background, this tiles.jpg. So we're going to use that for a background image here. So just starting off to look at that, I'm going to use the property background-image. And then to set this, I need to put this URL and then parentheses. I'm going to go and add my semicolon so I don't forget. And then inside of this, the parentheses after URL, I'm going to use the double quotes. And then I need to put the path to the file name or the full URL, depending on where this image is located. Since it's in the same folder as the rest of my files, I can just call this with the tiles.jpg. So here, I'm going to put in tiles.jpg, save this, and then when I refresh my page, I can see now that tiles are all over on this image, and we can see that it is doing some repeating. We can look at this image here and see this image is only this large. So once it goes over these 6 squares, it starts over again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the same thing. But the way this particular image is, it works well. It kind of flows together so you don't see the separation. So if you're going to do something like that, that's something you would want to think about, as well as how well can we read this text over that background. Maybe this would need another background or something to make that a little more visible, but we're not going to worry about that at the moment for this. I'm going to take a look at the background repeat. Well, first, before we do that, I'm going to find an image with a URL. So here, I'll go to the OTC website, and we'll use an image that we have on here somewhere. So we'll use, nope. All right, so that's not set up to do that. So here we'll go to another page, see if we can't find an image that we can use for the sake of this. And now this image on the left. No, it's not set up that way. Do we have other images on here? Here we have this image. Also not set up in a way that we can use that. Alright, so here I'm going to go to our communication site, news.otc.edu. We have some images over here that I know we can use. I'm going to come down here to our photo library and find an image to use. And we'll use the pilot image here. I'm going to copy this image address just so that I have a URL for that image. So now if I wanted to change what this image is and do it a little bit differently, I'm going to comment out this first line, and I'm going to use this URL here instead of tiles.jpg so we can take a look at that being used. Save it. And here now I have this image as my background image. I could resize that in Photoshop if I want to, if I need to, but I don't. I'm not going to mess with that. We can kind of see what happens here when this is blown up. And that's not really going to work for what we're doing here, so I'm going to switch that back to the other image that we were using. But now you see how that would work if you wanted to use an image that was hosted somewhere else. You can paste in that entire URL and get that to show up. But now going back to these tiles, I want to look at our background repeat options and background position. So here, the background dash repeat option, we have a few different choices. We can repeat X, we can repeat Y, and that's your X and Y axis. But by default, the repeat option is set to repeat. So here, if I just use repeat, refresh my page, that doesn't change anything. If I use repeat-X, we can see it repeats itself along that X axis. If I use Y, it's going to repeat itself along the Y axis. I can also use space. When I save that, that's going to come across the X axis and try to space that out. And depending on how much or how large my page is, how much space it has, we can see the spacing changes. And as it gets closer, once it runs out of room to have that many, it will take one of those away and add more space, and keep doing that depending on how much space there is for that entire image to display. So here, where we were at, we have 3 of them. We saw the repeat Y, repeat X. A lot of times you might need no repeat. You only want that image to show up one time. So here I'm going to save this, and when I refresh my page, no matter how large I make the page, I'm only getting that image one time, and by default it's putting it in the top left corner. So this is where using the positioning might come in if you need to move that to somewhere else. So background dash position. And then in here you usually want to set both your top or bottom and your left or right values, or whatever position you need to set that as. Now for this you can use top, bottom, left, right, center, or you can use percentages or pixel values. So looking at that, if I wanted to set this at the bottom right instead of the top left, I can put both of those values in there. If you only set one of these, then the second value is going to be center. So you need to be aware of that. That's why I like to set both values. Even if I wanted this to be bottom center, I would set that value. So now here it's setting it at the bottom right of the page. So when I expand this, it's still all the way to the right. It doesn't look like it's at the bottom, and that has to do with the page is only coming down so far. So I'm going to go back into the HTML and create some more content here. I'm going to look up some lorem ipsum real quick, and we'll get that added into our page. So lorem ipsum. Let's see. Tell it I need 20 paragraphs of lorem ipsum. And then I'll just copy this into the page so that it takes up plenty of space and we can see the difference that's happening here. So coming back over here, pasting this in, and making sure it's indented because that'll drive me nuts if it's not. And when I save this, refresh my page, that works. I don't need to add these other paragraph tags. It is expanding, but we notice we don't see that image in the top right anymore because it is down here in the bottom right. So that's something to be aware of when you are working with these positioning. So now if I wanted to change this to be bottom and center, like I said, this should go ahead and default that to bottom center because I only have one value in here. But if I put bottom space center, it's going to put it there. I find it to be a good idea to put it, add both of those values in there. So now looking at changing this to pixels, if I wanted to place this at 0 px and 0 px, save it, then I'm coming back up here where it's at the 0, 0 position, or if I needed to move this over or down, because the Y value is seconds, so this will move this down, say 50 pixels. When I save this and refresh it, now I'm down, moved down 50 pixels, but I'm still at 0x, or x is 0, where I can change this to, say, 250 pixels, save it when I refresh my page, and I can make it a little bit more specific that way. I can use those percentages like I mentioned, and that's going to act differently. So here I'm going to say move it down 25%, or move it from the left 25%. And now I can see it's still 50 pixels down because this is the Y value, but it went 25%, where I could change this to say 75%, and now it moved it further over. And when I enlarge my page, or I resize this window, I can see it's changing the positioning of that. It's still 75%, but there's more pixel value, so it makes it a little bit more relative, and that might be better for what you want. You can use percentages over here in the Y value as well. So now it's 75% over, 50% down. And again, depending on what size your actual page is, where that content's at. See, as I'm moving this, it's moving because those percentages are calculating to different pixel values. So that's something that you're going to want to be aware of. And now looking at, I'm going to go ahead and take out this background position, and we're going to look at the background attachment real quick. So here, depending on what I want to happen, I can, let me go ahead and refresh this. Yeah, now I have that centered. So actually I'm going to use the background position, but I'm just going to center it. So center, center, save. Now when I refresh my page, it's at the center, X and Y axis. And my page does scroll, so that works for what I'm wanting. Now here, excuse me, I'm going to set the background attachment. So background attachment, colon, and then I can set this to scroll, which is what it's already doing. So when I refresh my page, when I scroll the page, that image moves. If I were to set this to fixed, if I want everything to go across that image, I can set this background attachment to fixed. And now when I refresh my page, it's using just this window instead of the entire page to decide where that center value is. And as I scroll my page, that block stays where it was. So everything is going over it. So it's like if you set a fixed position for an image element and then set the Z index so that it was behind other content and went over top of it. It's the same kind of idea, except as a background image, I can't just come in here and click on this and get some of those options that I can get if I click on Mario up here where I use the image tag. Where here I can open this image in a new tab, I can get the URL for that image and see some things about it. Where if I wanted to figure out what was going on with this one, I would have to go in, may inspect the element, find where I have this tiles.jpg as my background image, and figure out some of those things.